Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism. It's my hope that what you learn on this channel will help you understand these relationships, to help you navigate your way out if you're in them, to help avoid getting in them in the first place, and to make sense of what's happening to you. These relationships are very difficult, and I know healing's a big part of them. We definitely touch on healing on this channel, but if you want to do a deeper dive, go to the video notes and you'll see a link to get more information. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe and join this magnificent community. So there's a new series we have that sort of looks at the why of narcissism, and it's meant to be a way to look back so you can look forward, in essence, right? It's by understanding the why, by understanding some of the origins of narcissism. It's a strange series because it's one where I'm speaking to both the people with narcissistic personalities and the people who are surviving these relationships. So today we're going to talk about attachment issues and how this can get people stuck and how this impacts people who have narcissistic personalities. The why of narcissism is so challenging, right? And this series is on the challenging issue of understanding some of the origins of narcissism, something everybody wants to know, and how this gets people stuck, and what it looks like in adult narcissism. It's also a series that's meant to help both those who are living with narcissistic patterns and the people who are feeling stuck, because understanding the why of narcissism often leaves them feeling guilty about wanting to do something about it. So it's like, I'm always leery of talking about the why, but it would be irresponsible for me to not, but at least frame it as it's not meant to be a justification. Now, I've done a prior video on this channel about how attachment issues can be a risk factor for developing an adult narcissistic personality. In short, many people do argue that narcissism is an attachment disorder, with narcissistic people having anxious and insecure attachments and sometimes avoidant attachments, which explains their abandonment fears and a lot of their bad behavior in relationships. It also helps understand sort of a lot of the push-pull of these relationships. Attachment issues arise in relationships because of early relationships in our lives, like during infancy, inconsistent caregivers, narcissistic caregivers, unavailable caregivers, or early life chaos. Not all people who have anxious and insecure attachments end up narcissistic. In fact, the vast majority of folks with anxious attachments end up struggling with neurotic spectrum patterns like anxiety or adult relationship difficulties. But the attachment model of narcissism is real and explains a lot of the behavioral acting out we see in people who have attachment issues that come into their adult narcissism. Therapy can really help people with attachment issues, and while narcissistic folks do not like feeling vulnerable, the ability to establish a trusting, consistent relationship with a therapist and to keep showing up even when it's uncomfortable, and the therapist keeps showing up too and keep doing the work, is how some therapists work with clients who are narcissistic. Narcissistic people will, if they are willing to be vulnerable, own up to the idea that they are afraid of being betrayed or being left or being shamed in a relationship. So as a defensive maneuver, they often try to beat the other person to the punch and abandon them first. But knowing about how attachment and early relationships can result in the development of narcissism can be hard for people who are in the narcissistically abusive relationships. One mistake that folks in narcissistic relationships make is that they think they can fix the attachment issue by being the consistent parent that the narcissistic person needed in childhood. It doesn't quite work that way. You aren't this person's therapist. You are a regular person in their life. You're their friend or their partner or their colleague. It ain't your job to reparent them. But if people recognize that attachment issues are a vulnerability to narcissism, especially if that person's a fixer, they may take it upon themselves to try and make it right and stick it out and always be available as a way of correcting this attachment history for the narcissist, or fixing it, or of creating a secure base for the narcissist. While attachment issues will pretty likely cut across all forms of narcissism, it may be most pronounced in the vulnerable and in the malignant narcissist, especially in the vulnerable narcissist, and I would argue in the neglectful narcissist as well. Relationships are a push-pull for them. And also for those with avoidant attachment styles, which we can see in narcissism. Again, it's best captured in the neglectful narcissist, where there's almost a disinterest in people. The attachment issues that are consistently observed in these relationships are a major contributor to the trauma-bonded cycles of narcissistic relationships. The vacillation between the good days and the bad days, between the idealization and the devaluation, between the I'm crazy about you, then I'm leaving. And all of the other trauma-bonded patterns follow. The narcissistic person's attachment issues means that they are too intense at the beginning, chaotic at the time of separation, and dysregulated when it comes to maintaining a relationship. And if the narcissistic person meets a person who has their own attachment struggles, the relationship can become very volatile, very toxic, and very unhealthy very quickly. Knowing about the attachment issues in a narcissistic person can make it very difficult to leave or to set boundaries. A person may hear the sad stories of the narcissistic person's past. The loss of a parent, or the unavailable parent, or the addicted parent, which may have contributed to the attachment issues of the person. And that can leave a person, particularly an empathic person, feeling as though that there's no way they could step away from the relationship or even set boundaries. And if the narcissistic person figures out that their attachment issues are enough to keep someone close and actually kind of keep getting away with bad behavior, then there's a risk that they could pull them out as a tool of manipulation. Oh, I have attachment issues. I have trouble saying goodbye. Addressing attachment issues in therapy is a slow burn, and therapy is not the same thing as just a close relationship in the narcissistic person's life. Therapy has clear parameters, and the therapist is not relying on the client for emotional needs. So doing attachment work in that space can make sense. It's one-sided, right? But if you are in a relationship with a narcissistic person who has attachment issues, and almost all narcissistic people have them, you won't fix them by just loving this person more. That kind of Beauty and the Beast BS is what gets a lot of people stuck. It is true that leaving someone with these kinds of issues that has a history of attachment issues is not easy, because it does set off an abandonment panic on the side of the narcissist, who will often get upset, lash out, panic, rage, hoover, love bomb, and try to keep you close. That can even set up a really unhealthy cycle of you getting tired of the abuse, pulling out of the relationship, them sensing the abandonment, them pulling you back in, them behaving badly again, and the beat goes on. And no, you sticking around and enduring their abuse will not fix their attachment issues. Addressing the attachment issues is their responsibility to step up and to be an adult and do the hard work of therapy. And then we always have to remember, when we think of the origins of narcissism, there's always that temperament piece. So when you take that difficult temperament, that's often sort of the biological crux of what takes a person to narcissism, and it comes against the environmental impact of attachment. Those two things together are why some folks who have these attachment issues and then have that temperament, boom, we see it go to narcissism. And for other folks don't have that difficult temperament but have the attachment issues come up, they may go over more to sort of the anxiety that comes from having an anxious or insecure attachment. It's a tough one because, again, a lot of folks who get into narcissistic relationships are very, very empathic people. And the idea that, yikes, this person did have a rough start, I can't just walk out on them, this feels very cold and cruel. Then you need to take a good look in the mirror and ask yourself, is your sacrifice of yourself going to be what you're willing to do to avoid the bad feeling? Because unless this narcissistic person is rolling up to therapy, doing the work, and there is meaningful commitment to it, and you're seeing observable change, you're going to spend the rest of your life regulating this person's emotions. Thanks again.